Welcome back, riders. Today we are going to finally kick off 25 Days of Coasters. If you have not already, check out my preview video I put out earlier this week. That video will explain how the series will work and all the other information. As I stated in that video, I have 11 new coasters in my top 25 this year. 10 of them were new credits for me I rode for the first time, and one coaster re-entered the top 25 after I grew to appreciate it a lot more after my rides this year. And my 25th favorite coaster is that one coaster, the Incredible Hulk coaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure. Let's start off with the stats and background. The Incredible Hulk coaster is located at Universal Orlando's Islands of Adventure, so naturally that is in Orlando, Florida. It was built by Swiss manufacturer Bulliger and Mablard, or B&M for short, and it is their sitting coaster model. The ride has a top height of 110 feet, a drop of 104.9 feet, and reaches a top speed of 67 miles per hour. Incredible Hulk is actually a launch roller coaster propelled by tires, believe it or not. The ride features 7 versions, or moments you go upside down, in the following order: a zero G roll, a cobra roll, which actually counts as 2 inversions, a vertical loop, a corkscrew, a second vertical loop, and a second corkscrew. The ride traverses 3,700 feet of track, and the ride originally opened in 1999. However, it's worth noting that Incredible Hulk was basically rebuilt during the 2015 and 2016 seasons, as most of its track was replaced and the ride received new trains that featured onboard audio. Incredible Hulk is actually one of my most ridden coasters as I have 46 lifetime rides on Incredible Hulk, which makes it one of my most ridden coasters, especially for roller coasters outside the Midwest. I first rode Incredible Hulk on New Year's Eve in 2016, and then I've re-ridden it in November last year, September this year, and then literally just a week and a half ago. So now I'll go into my personal thoughts on the ride. As this roller coaster is at Universal, it is actually themed pretty well. Walking up to the attraction, there is audio the Hulk yelling whenever a train is launched out of the tunnel. The entrance of the ride is the perfect place for pictures, as you have shown here. You have the giant Hulk statue holding up one of the old trains from before the refurbishment, and there's also a ripped up piece of the coaster track before the refurbishment as well. The queue is also very cool. There is occasional mist, they have a ginormous plasma ball, there are sound effects, and they have screens that show an science experiment where they turn test subjects into their own version of the Hulk. I wish they had more than just the 3 test subjects on the screens, but I just feel like you see them over and over again, but that's just being nitpicky. But luckily, I hardly ever wait in the actual line for Hulk, so it's not that big of a deal. There's a single rider line, and they let you re-ride too if there's an empty station, which I have found a few times. So I don't go through the queue all that much, and the single rider line is really good on this attraction. Right when you dispatch, the onboard audio kicks in, and it is a commanding presence as you enter the tunnel. It's a good old doom, doom, doom. In the tunnel, there are actually many screens that show that you're about to be the next test subject, kind of carrying on from the theme of the queue, and you're about to be turned into your Hulk. The onboard audio lets out a Hulk yell as you're launched uphill directly into the zero G roll. Between the uphill launch, with all the theming and the music right into the zero G roll, this is one of my favorite sequences on any coaster. The zero G roll is taken with so much speed, and I'm just a sucker for launches in general anyways. The place you got the music to, it's awesome. After the zero G roll, you end up going over water where there's also a splashdown effect. You then traverse the Cobra roll, which is extremely intense. Then you level out and go through the first vertical loop, and I am almost always graying out during this loop. You then duck under a pathway into a mist tunnel, which is pretty refreshing if it's a hot day. I would say this portion is the first third of the ride. The second third of the ride is still a powerhouse. After the mist tunnel, you wrap around the station, but is still taken with significant speed. You power through the first corkscrew, and since the corkscrew is actually pretty high off the ground, you exit the corkscrew and then you take a noticeable plunge afterwards. This leads into the second vertical loop, which again is an absolute powerhouse and super intense. The ride then turns to the left while climbing up, and once you hit the apex, it's almost like you hit an S-bend going downhill, which I often think is an overlooked part of the ride, and I actually really enjoy this part. From this point on, this is where the ride no longer acts as the super mega powerhouse I've been saying it is, but in reality, that's okay with me. You take a slower turn into the mid-course brake run. Sometimes it runs really fast into this and it's still a little intense, but once you hit that mid-course, the last third of the ride starts, and you take a dive off the mid-course brake run into the last inversion, which is that last corkscrew, and the ride just does a bunch of turns kind of before to the end of the ride, really just meandering around. Most people aren't super fond of this part of the ride, but I agree it's nowhere near like the first two-thirds of the ride. I personally still really enjoy this part. Whatever reason, like I've always liked sections like this on B&Ms where they just kind of meander around like maybe a Rougarou or a Dominator. But on Incredible Hulk, even during this section, you still have the fantastic onboard audio going on in this section. And it's really going on during the entire ride. It really enhances the whole thing. So I think I have to address why I decided to bump up the Incredible Hulk coaster in my rankings this year. Last year I had Hulk ranked at number 32 and I moved it all the way up into number 25 despite all the new credits I got this year. For me it comes down to two things and they could kind of go hand in hand. Theming and onboard audio. I gained a new appreciation for theming this year. I do not need theming to consider a roller coaster to be fantastic. Trust me, there's going to be a handful of coasters throughout the rest of 25 Days of Coasters that have literally no theming, zip, zero. Maybe it's because I went to European parks this summer where theming was more heavily present and more part of the experience. But I just think theming elevates a ride further up my rankings now than it has in the past. The queue, station, and launch tunnel are absolutely fantastic. And then you have the onboard audio. It slaps. Like it just straight slaps. I love on Dispatch. It just starts with the booming doom doom doom, and then it's the absolute classic when you're going through the zero G roll or up the first vertical loop where it's like doom doom. If you know the ride, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I will literally go like like all day at the park or even at home. I think about that all the time, and it's just one of my favorite parts of the ride, really. But even if you strip Hulk of all its theming, including the onboard audio, it's still an incredibly forceful ride. And it's a B&M with a launch. I love launches, and B&M's one of my favorite manufacturers, if not my favorite. So combining the two is just like a happy marriage. I would only say Kumba is really like in the same ballpark for B&M intensity, at least on a sit down or floorless. And like I mentioned, the launch. I'm just a sucker for a launch. And this ride has a great one into one of the best inversions ever. So that is all I got for number 25 of 25 Days of Coasters. Have you been on the Incredible Hulk coaster? What do you think of it? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I'll be linking a more in-depth review with better footage made by Canopy Coaster in the description below. So if you want to hear more, see more of the ride, go ahead and check that out. And I'll hopefully see you all tomorrow for number 24. Push down, pull up, exit to the right. I hope you enjoyed the video, and go have your greatest day yet. Choo choo bye.